When you think about it, the animal kingdom is just staggering. From the tiniest bug to the biggest blue whale, it's almost too much to wrap your head around. So in this explainer, we're going to create a kind of user's guide, a way to find the fundamental blueprint that connects every single animal on this planet, including us.
So let me ask you this. How is a sponge related to a squirrel? I mean, it sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, right? One is basically a squishy, living filter stuck to a rock, and the other is, well, it's a furry little acrobat that's way too smart for its own good. But believe it or not, they share a common ancestor from way, way back. The secret to how they're related is in tracing the big evolutionary inventions that separate them. So let's dive in and see how it all connects.
All right, so here's our roadmap. First, we're going to see how scientists managed to bring some order to this incredible chaos. Then, we'll literally build an animal from the ground up, starting with the simplest blobs, then adding layers and some actual shape. From there, we'll look at the invention of complex internal parts, and finally, we'll cross the great divide that puts us on our branch of the tree. And at the very end, we'll see exactly where you and I fit into this grand picture.
To make sense of millions of species, you can't just memorize them all. It's impossible. So what scientists do is look for the fundamental patterns, this sort of evolutionary blueprint. They use a consistent checklist to group animals based on their most basic body plans.
So to build out our blueprint, we really just need to ask a few key questions for any animal we look at. First, are we looking at just a loose collection of cells, or do we have organized tissues and organs? What about its body shape, its symmetry? How many special layers did it grow from as an embryo? Is there a body cavity inside? Is the body made of repeating segments? And the big one, does it have a notochord, which is kind of the precursor to a backbone? Let's start with the simplest forms of life.
To really get a grip on complexity, you've got to start with simplicity. And believe me, in the entire animal kingdom, it does not get any simpler than a sponge.
Okay, so meet the sponges. They belong to a major group, or phylum, called Porifera. They operate at what's called the cellular level. Just think of it like a loose neighborhood of specialized cells that all agree to work together, but they haven't formed true tissues or organs yet. And their whole life revolves around this super simple system you see here. Water gets pulled in through all those tiny pores, the ostia, and then pumped out a big hole at the top, the osculum. That's it. That's how they eat, breathe, and get rid of waste. Simple, but it works.
And because of this kind of loose, blob-like organization, most sponges are asymmetrical. I mean, there is just no way you could slice a sponge down the middle and get two matching halves. It's not going to happen. They are, by definition, the most basic blueprint you can have.
All right, time to take our first major evolutionary jump. This is the moment where animals stopped being just blobs and started developing coordinated tissues and a consistent body shape.
So say hello to the Cnidarians. This is your jellyfish, sea anemones, and corals. These guys are a huge upgrade. They actually have a tissue level of organization, and they introduce symmetry to the party, specifically radial symmetry. That means you can slice them up like a pizza from the center out and get equal halves. And they basically have two models, the polyp, which is stuck in one place like a sea anemone, and the medusa, the free-swimming version we all know as a jellyfish.
Now, on the inside, cnidarians are what we call diploblastic. This is a really important idea. It just means their body is built from only two original layers, an outer layer called the ectoderm and an inner one called the endoderm. That jiggly, jelly-like stuff in the middle? That's just a non-living filler called mesoglia. So hang on to that idea of a two-layer plan, because the next huge step forward was all about adding a third layer.
Okay, this next evolutionary innovation was a total game changer. I mean, it changed everything. This was the invention of a third layer, the mesoderm, and it opened up a whole new universe of possibilities for how complex an animal could be.
And this picture just lays it out perfectly. On the left, you've got the simple two-layer diploblastic plan. But on the right, that's the triploblastic plan. See that red layer in the middle, the mesoderm? That's the magic ingredient. It's the raw material for building true organs, muscles, and most importantly, an internal body cavity called a column.
So once evolution had 3 layers to play with, it started to experiment with what to do with the space inside. The very first design was, well, no space at all. These are the acolymates, like flatworms. They've got all 3 layers, sure, but the space between their gut and the outer body wall is just packed solid with tissue, no cavity.
The next experiment was a sort of cavity. These are the pseudocoelomates. Think of something like a roundworm. They have a body cavity, but we call it a false one because if you look closely, it's not completely lined by that all-important mesoderm tissue. It's a good try, a step in the right direction, but not the final design.
And finally, we get to the coelamates. This includes earthworms and pretty much every other complex animal you can think of, including us. Here, you see a true coelom, a body cavity that is completely lined by mesoderm. And this was the breakthrough. This fluid-filled space acts like a protective cushion for your organs, it's a shock absorber, and it gives organs room to grow and move around. This one invention is what allowed animals to get big, complex, and conquer the world.
So let's just quickly recap that. Looking at this table, you can see the whole story right there. We go from flatworms with no cavity to roundworms with a false cavity, and then to segmented worms with a true functional coelom. This whole journey, developing a protected internal space, is what set the stage for all the crazy complex animals that came next.
So we've built a pretty fancy animal now. It's got tissues, symmetry, 3 layers, and a true body cavity. You'd think we're almost there, right? But there's one more massive fork in the evolutionary road, and this is the one that separates the vast majority of animals from the group that we belong to.
This fork in the road is all about the notochord. Just think of it as a stiff, flexible rod that runs along an animal's back. It's made from that same mesoderm layer, and its job is to provide skeletal support. In some animals, it sticks around for their whole life, but in others, like us, it's basically the first draft for what will eventually become our backbone.
Any animal that has a notochord at some point in its life is called a chordate. Everything else is a non-chordate. And it's not just that one little rod. As you can see here, a bunch of other things change too. In us chordates, our main nerve cord is hollow and runs along our back. In non-chordates, it's solid and runs along their belly. We also have other features like gill slits and a tail that goes past the anus, at least when we're embryos. These are the deep, fundamental differences that create that huge divide in the animal kingdom.
All right, so after all these huge evolutionary inventions, where do we, Homo sapiens, actually fit in? Let's take that blueprint we've been building and apply it to ourselves.
Okay, and here is a super important, kind of tricky distinction. All vertebrates are chordates, but not all chordates are vertebrates. We belong to the exclusive club within the chordates called the vertebrates. And the key difference is that in us, that flexible notochord we had as an embryo gets replaced by a hard, bony vertebral column, our spine. Some simpler chordates just keep that flexible rod their whole lives, so they never become true vertebrates. So, zooming in on the vertebrates, we're part of a group called tetrapods, animals with 4 limbs. You can see the main classes laid out here. You've got amphibians, reptiles, birds, and finally, us, the mammals. And what makes our class special? Well, as you can see in that last row, we're defined by having hair and mammary glands. We also have a super efficient 4-chambered heart, something we actually share with birds. So if you put it all together, our full address is we are coelomate, triblastic, bilaterally symmetrical, vertebrate chordates. See, we fit the blueprint perfectly.
And that's really what this is all about, this whole system of classification. It isn't just about putting animals into neat little boxes. It's about telling the epic story of life on Earth. It reveals the sequence of incredible innovations that took us all the way from a simple sponge to a clever squirrel and absolutely everything in between.
So, we've mapped out the animal kingdom based on everything we've found so far. But the one thing we know for sure is that evolution never, ever stops. It's always tinkering, always experimenting. Which just makes you wonder, what incredible new blueprints is it designing right at this very moment? What will future scientists add to this amazing story?